Hello and welcome to the programme. The OSCE Human Dimension Implementation Meeting is going on in Warsaw. It's the largest annual human rights and democracy conference. So what issues are being addressed at the conference this year? Well, I'm pleased to say to learn more about this, we're joined in studio by Vitalia Lebid, a lawyer at the Strategic Litigations Center of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union. Hello, thank you so much for coming in today.
Hello, thank you for inviting.
So you just came back from Poland. For our audience who are perhaps not so aware of what the OSCE does, especially this part of the OSCE, can you tell us a bit about the meeting overview and the topics that were discussed, especially from the Ukrainian side?
Well, Human Rights Dimension Implementation Meeting, it's an international conference held by the OSCE, and it's an important platform that, take attention from all of the world, not only Europe, and all member countries, 57 countries are present there, but not only officials, but also civil society and media. And it is important for Ukraine, first of all, to say about our problem, and of course in the context of the currently ongoing armed conflict in our territory, because usually, for example, Russia may use this platform as a place for their propaganda against the real situation in Ukraine.
So how do you see Russia using their hybrid war tactics within the OSCE to influence other member states? What sort of strategies do they use?
So, they present their truth, but we here in Ukraine know that it is not true for ourselves. We know what's going on our territory, and even we haven't access to this territory, but we have important evidence from witnesses from this territory. And also Russia used so-called GONGO, it's governmental oriental NGO, who present themselves as a representative of civil society, but in reality they are not such representatives. And for example, at the plenary meeting at this conference, so-called Crimean representative of civil society want to make some statements, but this representative were registered after the Crimea were occupied by Russia. Yeah. And we may conclude that they are not really civil society from Crimea.
It was like a pseudo-civil society.
Yes.
But as far as I understand, the Ukrainian side actually managed to successfully block.
Yes, and finally they blocked their statements, and because it's against the rule of the OSCE.
I was actually watching part of the stream that was offered by the OSCE from the conference, and Emily Zheparova, who works for Ukraine's Ministry of Information Policy, she had 2.5 minutes to talk, and then it had to go to another delegation. So how useful do you think actually these different conferences are to get Ukraine's message across?
Of course, there are some problems with the way to send the right message, because there are a lot of representatives there, and each country has its own problem and concentrate on their problems. So, and each representatives of the government has so little time in order to present their ideas.
Because that was the thing, she spoke about Mykola Semena and about other journalists who have been in prison just for doing their work.
Yes, she spoke about journalists from Crimea who currently are captured and suspected for different crimes in Russia. Well, I think that we should use this international platform, even if the effectiveness is not so obvious, but we should use this tool together with other tools such as judicial platform in the International Court and the OSCE conferences, like some political and diplomatic way of influence to the international society in order to continue sanctions against Russia.
And I mean, it's sort of a multi-dimensional approach. You have the OSCE, but you have different other bodies as well. But at the OSCE meeting, like you were there, what sort of reaction did you get from other delegates who were there after Ukraine was spoken about and the different rights violations that were mentioned?
Well, we have lots of countries, our partners, who give great support to Ukraine, and it's of course Canada and United States who were present also there. But at the same time, during the speaking of representatives of Russian Federation, I heard someone support also their point of view. So I think we should do more in order to have more wide support at the international level. And at this conference, we have our side event that was dedicated to the conflict on the east of Ukraine. It was called Truth Finding and Prosecution, War Crimes and Violence Against Human Rights in the east of Ukraine.
And I know you want to speak a bit about this. So can you tell us a bit about your work then to document these war crimes and perhaps the path that you'd like to take in order for the people who commit the war crimes to be properly prosecuted?
Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union since 2014 start working with this sphere, with the victims of the conflict, and I, as a lawyer, provide legal support to the victims of the conflict. Also in our organization we have documentary center who collect and monitor the situation at the occupied territory and document violation of the rights of our citizens and also war crimes and the crimes against humanity.
But that must be incredibly risky for the people who do that work.
Well, yes, these people cannot go, for example, to Russia because there they can be suspected for different crimes.
But I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to say, but do you actually have people who work in the occupied territory? Or
no, we don't. We don't work exactly at the occupied territory because it's really dangerous.
But you collect evidence from there.
But yes, we collect evidence. We interrogate victims and eyewitnesses who were there, and they provide us information what's going on there, what they saw there, and who captured there, who tortured there. Also, during such interrogation, they provide us some additional information, for example, photo, video that also may use as evidence for us as lawyers. And we use this for their protection at national level and at international level as well in the international courts.
So it must be quite a challenge for you if you have all this documentation that's coming your way, all this evidence, photos, videos, testimonies. How do you sort of deal with all this information and then use it at a later stage for a case?
Well, firstly, we try to systemize them and to qualify to what exactly crime were committed. And our next step is that we try to initiate investigation of this crime. We have two ways at national level in Ukraine and in Russia, because we states that Russia is also a part of the conflict, and they have effective control under the territory where the violations were happened. So we initiate investigation. We said about this relation to the national police, who at the next stage investigate them, and we sent some statements to the Russian Federation, but due to our practice, they do not They do not say that have some relation to this conflict. So Russia said that it's your territory, so it's your problem, and Ukrainian authorities should investigate such crime. But here in Ukraine we have another problem, that our enforcement agencies haven't any access to this territory. So due to such situation, all the victims haven't any effective remedies at national level, and that is why we have to lodge application, for example, to European Court on Human Rights, and we lodge such application for different cases such as killing, for example, torture, destruction of property, sexual violence. They are prisoners.
So all these different things that we've been hearing about over the past 4 years. Once they're giving to these different European organizations, what happens then? So they also assess the case, you give them the evidence, they assess the case, and they rule on this. But is their ruling enforced even? I mean, how is this process working?
You mean in the European
In the European Court, yes.
Well, this process is very time-consuming, very long, and it may be continued, for example, 10 years, because first of all, this type of cases are very complicated, and as I said before, we lodge these cases against two states, Ukraine and Russia. And of course, our first aim is to prove the Russia involvement in this conflict. And how this process is going on. Of course, European Court of Human Rights firstly should answer the first important question: what is the jurisdiction of this territory where the violation happened? So we use practice of the European Court of Human Rights, so-called precedents, in different cases that are similar to the situation in Ukraine. And there are such cases in the European Court connected to the armed conflict, for example, in Georgia.
And how do they rule that, actually? That's interesting, because that could prove a case study for Ukraine, almost. So how does the European Court deal with something like Georgia?
Well, in individual case, there are some cases where the European Court find the violation of the people. For example, the most, important case for us is so-called Ilashko and other versus Moldova and Russia. So if you know, this conflict will happen on the territory of Moldova, but in the Transnistria, yes, Republic, and in this case, the European Court found that Russia are guilty for the violation of the citizens of Moldova on the territory of Pridnestrovia. And from this point of view, the European Court of Human Rights start their doctrine of effective control. So it's like extraterritorial jurisdiction. So even if the territory is under the official territory of one country, but another country may have effective control through the political, military, economical, informational support. Of course, all this should be proved by certain evidence, and exactly our organization collects such evidence of the Russian support in the information, economical, military sphere on the occupied territory. So due to this, we have serious reason and hope that such effective control doctrine will be used for the cases in Ukraine. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for coming in, and you do amazing work, and best of luck with it. Thank you very much.
Bye.
That was Vitalia Lebid, a lawyer at the Strategic Litigations Center of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union. You're watching UATV.